Welcome back to Girl of Recaps. Today I am going to explain a 2019 comedy drama movie titled Jojo Rabbit. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. The imaginary city of Falkenheim, where Nazi Germany is beginning to crumble, is the residence of Jojo, a 10-year-old child who regards Adolf Hitler as his imaginary companion but struggles to fasten his own shoes. He is a dedicated patriot and a zealot, indoctrinated with Nazi principles and eager to assist his nation during the conflict, which is why he is enlisting in Jungvolk, the junior division of the Hitler Youth, alongside his friend Yorkie. They are spending the entire weekend at a camp organized by Captain Klenzendorf, his deputy Freddie Finkel, and Fräulein Rahm, who oversees the League of German Girls. They're providing child-sized uniforms and a special dagger before taking them to engage in a range of activities such as grenade throwing, trench digging, map navigation, and gas protection, among others. Or at least the boys are. The girls are instructed in treating wounds, making beds, and how to conceive. Jojo excels in tasks like describing Jewish individuals and burning books, but when it comes to close combat, he becomes frightened and sneaks away, drawing the attention of the older boys. When the moment arrives for the boy to learn how to kill, these adolescents notice Jojo's reluctance and place a rabbit in his arms, asking him to demonstrate. Jojo insists he isn't afraid, but he still can't bring himself to do it, so he attempts to release the rabbit. However, the teenage boy grabs it before it can escape and kills it himself, then proceeds to mock Jojo for his failure. Since he's frightened like a small rabbit, they start calling him Jojo Rabbit, which disturbs him and causes him to run to the woods. While he sits on a tree root crying, imaginary Hitler appears and tells him rabbits are actually quite brave. They venture into the wild every day to get their carrots, and they have to be stealthy to avoid being caught. Encouraged to be a courageous rabbit, Jojo runs back to camp, where Klenzendorf is instructing the kids to throw grenades under his supervision. Jojo passes by him, snatches the grenade he has in his hand, and continues to run into the woods, where he throws the grenade so poorly that it bounces off a tree and lands at his feet, exploding in his face. Jojo falls unconscious, but he has some hazy recollections of people taking him to the hospital and his mother Rosie Betzler visiting him. He awakens several days later in his room, and the first thing he notices when he gets out of bed is the limp in his leg, the second being the scars on his face he discovers when looking in the mirror. His mother then comes to check on him, hugs him, and reassures him that he has her support even though his father is gone and his sister Inga has died. After making him put on his uniform again, Rosie takes Jojo back to the Jungvolk headquarters, where they find Klenzendorf awkwardly feeding Finkel. Klenzendorf has already been demoted for negligence, but Rosie still strikes him in the groin with her knee and slaps him with her glove, making him promise he'll give Jojo some tasks to do, even if they aren't on the field, and that he'll feel included. Jojo is assigned the duty of putting up propaganda posters around town and delivering conscriptions, which he does with great enthusiasm. One afternoon, while working, he spots his mother gazing at a group of people hanged at a gallows in the public square, and when Jojo asks her what they did, she responds, "What they could." When he returns home later, his mother isn't there, and he begins to feel anxious when he hears noises coming from his sister's room. He enters the bedroom to investigate and discovers a strange mark on the floor that ascends the wall, so he inserts his knife into it and manages to reveal a concealed section of the wall. There is a space behind it large enough for a person to crawl into, filled with various objects scattered around. At the end of it, he's stunned to find a young girl, Elsa Kor, who follows him out of the room as he screams and runs around the house in terror. She catches him just as he's about to reach the front door and pushes him against the wall, showing him she has his dagger and admitting she's Jewish, but she's there because Rosie had invited her to hide in her home. If Jojo reveals her presence, Elsa promises she'll claim that he and Rosie helped her, which would result in their deaths as well. After she returns to her hiding place with his knife, Jojo hurries to his room and discusses his options with imaginary Hitler. Concluding that he should negotiate, he grabs a kitchen knife and a pot for protection, then returns to his sister's room to tell Elsa she should find somewhere else to stay. He becomes frightened again, however, when she surprises him from behind, takes the kitchen knife as well, and forces him out of the room. Jojo consults with imaginary Hitler once more, and they decide that he should make Elsa feel secure so she'll let her guard down. When Rosie comes back in the evening, Jojo tells her he's heard noises upstairs, but she replies that it must have been rats. After Rosie puts Jojo to bed, she goes to see Elsa to advise her to be more cautious, because if something were to occur, she cannot choose Elsa over her own son. She also reminds Elsa that as long as there is at least one person alive out there, then they are losing. The following day, Jojo goes to the swimming pool, which should aid him with his leg. He notices that Klenzendorf and Finkel are there too, sitting close together and showing apprehension towards Rosie. After his mom departs, Jojo approaches them and asks Klenzendorf what he should do if he encounters a Jewish person. The answer is to call the Gestapo, who will eliminate them and anyone who assisted them. Jojo also wonders how one can even identify a Jewish person, to which Klenzendorf replies he doesn't know either and suggests that someone should write a book about it. Once he returns home, Jojo attempts to talk to Elsa again. After pointing out that they're at an impasse because neither of them can betray the other if they wish to avoid trouble, he tells her he'll permit her to stay in exchange for information about Jewish people so he can write an exposé. Elsa agrees and explains that they are people just like him, but since he won't believe her, she says they're money-loving demons that are allergic to food. Jojo quickly realizes her plan to make him bring her food, and when he starts explaining that the Aryan race is superior and the Jewish people are weak, Elsa grabs him, covers his mouth, and shakes him while explaining that there's nothing weak about Jewish people before returning to her hiding place. When Rosie comes back in the evening, she burns something in the fireplace before pouring some wine and playing music. She's very pleased because the Allies have taken Italy and France will be next. Jojo starts arguing with her for being against her country, so Rosie cuts the conversation short and tells him to eat. She isn't eating, though, asserting she isn't hungry, and Jojo quickly suspects she's keeping the food for Elsa, so he decides to have the leftovers for himself. He thinks that if his father were present, he would understand, and since he wants to see him so desperately, Rosie puts on her husband's jacket and draws a beard on her face with ash to reprimand Jojo for speaking like that to his mother. Using her husband's voice, she also asks him to look after her, because she's doing the best she can. Then, she turns up the music and makes Jojo dance with her. The next day, Jojo gives Elsa a pencil and paper for her to sketch where Jewish people live and where Jewish women lay their eggs. Elsa starts drawing, but she declines to answer questions about her family. However, she does tell Jojo about her fiancé Nathan, who is away fighting with the resistance. The picture she gives Jojo is a sketch of his own head because that's where Jewish people reside. Jojo gets an idea for a scheme. He writes a letter pretending to be Nathan breaking up with Elsa and reads it to her, who clearly doesn't believe him, but it still hurts her to hear such dreadful things about her with her fiancé's name attached to it. She rushes back to her hiding spot, and seeing her so distressed and human makes Jojo regret the entire thing. So he writes a new letter as Nathan saying the previous one wasn't true, and he still does love her. Elsa thanks him and asks him to bring her more letters in the future. They play a game of who can name more famous and significant people on their sides, and Elsa wins when she mentions Jesus. Sometime later, Jojo and Rosie go for a walk to the riverbank, and Rosie tells him how different this area used to be. There were people here all the time, dancing and enjoying romance, which Jojo disapproves of. Rosie also thinks children shouldn't be discussing politics. They should be playing and climbing trees, and everyone should be dancing, as a symbol of freedom. Jojo disdains this as well and takes off on his bicycle, with Rosie following closely. When they reach the road, they see a truck of soldiers returning home, looking somber and defeated. Jojo goes back to his house in a foul mood as well, so Elsa tries to distract him by telling him absurd fantasy tales about her people. He starts warming up to her and enjoying her presence, for which imaginary Hitler scolds him later, saying his German brain shouldn't be controlled. After he goes to bed, Rosie spends some time with Elsa, telling her she's pleased to have her and witness her growth into a woman since she couldn't do so with her own daughter. The next day, Jojo goes to the Jungvolk headquarters, where he discovers Klenzendorf and Finkel conversing with their noses nearly touching, a clear tension between them. Jojo informs them that he's composing an exposé on Jewish people, but they laugh at him, not believing it's genuine. Klenzendorf decides to share with him some designs he's created for his and Finkel's uniforms, which are quite extravagant. Then he assigns Jojo a new task. He must gather scrap for the war effort. While strolling the streets dressed as a robot, Jojo encounters his mother distributing small anti-Nazi pamphlets, and he also meets Yorkie, who has been enlisted as a soldier. When Jojo informs him that he has apprehended a Jewish person, Yorkie responds that he saw one in the woods and doesn't grasp what the fuss is about, which gives Jojo much to contemplate. He visits Elsa as soon as he gets back home and presents her with some colored pencils he has discovered, but he also reminds her that it is forbidden for a Nazi and a Jewish person to be friends. Elsa remarks that he isn't truly a Nazi because he hasn't harmed her. He's just a solitary kid trying to find a place to belong. They agree to disagree. After Elsa realizes how filthy she's become, Jojo permits her to leave the room and take a bath. She even borrows some of his sister's garments. They're about to have dinner together when someone knocks on the door, and after she rushes back to her hiding place, Jojo opens the door to find a group of Gestapo agents led by Hermann Diertz. Shortly after, Klenzendorf and Finkel arrive as well, claiming they had to deliver some pamphlets to Jojo, which sounds like an excuse. The Gestapo immediately begins searching the house for any suspicious activities as Diertz asks Jojo why his mother is away all day and why his uniform is missing its knife. Elsa appears then, dressed in Inga's clothes and pretending to be her. She tells them she was the one who took the knife because her brother had been bothering her, so the Gestapo proceeds to search her room next. Diertz remains suspicious of her, so he requests her identification. Elsa retrieves Inga's ID from her drawer and hands it to Klenzendorf, who asks her for her birth date. Elsa guesses correctly, and Klenzendorf allows her to leave. However, Diertz intervenes when he notices Jojo's exposé book. The Gestapo begins flipping through it, laughing at all the demonic illustrations of Jewish people, and while Klenzendorf doesn't seem very amused, Elsa feels quite upset and betrayed when they reach a section where Jojo has detailed all the ways Nathan should perish. Relieved not to have found anything incriminating, the Gestapo departs, and Klenzendorf leaves as well after returning Elsa's ID and Jojo his knife. Elsa notices that the date on the papers is different from what she stated, indicating that Klenzendorf has been aiding them all along. Jojo mentions that nobody really knows Inga is deceased, so Elsa could continue to impersonate her and live with them normally. However, she is still hurt by the book's content and tells Jojo they cannot be friends. Imaginary Hitler berates Jojo for trying to befriend Elsa and believing she's a good person, telling him to get his priorities straight. While he's out fetching some food, Jojo finds Rosie hanged at a gallows in the public square. Devastated, he clings to her legs and weeps bitterly, even attempting to fasten her shoe to no avail. After staring at the body for hours, he returns home with his knife in hand, blaming Elsa for Rosie's death and ready to stab her for it. She stops his hand just in time, and he only manages to scratch her. As he starts crying again, Elsa feels compassion for him and comforts him. She explains she's always known Rosie is part of the resistance, although she's unaware of the specifics, and Jojo's father is fighting for the resistance as well. However, Rosie told him the opposite to avoid upsetting him. She also reveals her parents were taken to a concentration camp, so the two of them only have each other. Jojo starts going out to scavenge food from trash bins and notices how ravaged the city is becoming each day. He and Elsa establish a routine together, sharing meals and enjoying the fabricated letters from Nathan that Jojo writes. One afternoon, the city falls into a state of chaos when the Allies launch an offensive, taking advantage of Hitler having committed suicide. Jojo encounters Yorkie, who is carrying some armaments around because the army is so desperate for soldiers that they're sending out the children. Jojo tells him the Jewish person he captured is somewhat his girlfriend now, and he's concerned because it's illegal, but Yorkie points out he's met the Russians and the Japanese, and they are worse than Jewish people. Rum finds them next, and after sending Yorkie off with a gun, she gives Jojo a uniform jacket, so he won't be shot by their own side by mistake. A bomb detonates in the area, leaving Jojo disoriented as he observes everyone fighting, including children and the elderly, and even Klenzendorf and Finkel in their extravagant attire. Jojo is too frightened to fight, so he takes refuge in an abandoned building until the conflict ends. He emerges after things settle down and sees the Americans removing the Nazi flags to replace them with their own, celebrating their victory. Soviet soldiers are apprehending every Nazi they encounter, including Diertz and the rest of the Gestapo, and noticing the jacket Jojo is wearing, they detain him as well. He finds Klenzendorf among the other captives, who tells him he's a good boy and that he should look after his sister before removing his jacket and spitting at him, calling him a Jew so that the soldiers release him. Jojo can only watch as Klenzendorf is taken away to be executed by a firing squad on his way home. Jojo encounters Yorkie, who says he's going to visit his mother for a hug. When Yorkie mentions that Jojo's girlfriend can be free now, Jojo becomes disheartened at the thought of Elsa leaving and rushes back to the house. He decides to deceive Elsa and tell her that Germany won the war so she can't leave. However, after going through his book and seeing drawings of his mother and a rabbit in a cage, he pretends to write another letter from Nathan and reads it to her, claiming he has a plan to help her escape the city. Elsa then finally reveals that Nathan passed away last year from tuberculosis, but she found the letters comforting. Jojo confesses that he loves her romantically, but he understands she only loves him like a brother, which she acknowledges, so he still wants to assist her in escaping. Imaginary Hitler is disappointed in him for this and tries to persuade him to reconsider, but Jojo ultimately stands up to him and kicks him out of the house through the window. Elsa is reluctant to go out, but Jojo encourages her until she manages to step outside. At that moment, a car with the American flag drives by, causing Elsa to slap Jojo for having deceived her. As they contemplate what to do next, they decide to dance to celebrate their newfound freedom.